I found out my husband was having an affair, so I spent years perfecting my revenge. Story time. So it started off by finding out that my husband Steve had had an affair after 4 years of marriage. One night we just sat on the sofa and I saw a text appear on his work phone, and it was from a woman called Amy. I was already a little bit suspicious at this point, so I decided to check his phone. And let me tell you, the texts I found should never be on anyone's work phone. They were like getting you fired level of inappropriate. It was graphic, okay? My mind then started to go to all the weird things that Steve had been doing recently. He'd walk out the room to answer a phone call or reply to a text, and because he's a doctor, he was claiming that this would break confidentiality. When he'd finished his evening shifts, he'd come home smelling of perfume, so I confronted him on it, and he said that it was just the patient's perfume that must have rubbed off on his clothes. But strangely, every single time it was the same perfume. He started getting phone calls at all times of the day to ask him to go in to cover 6 shifts. These just so happened to be in the evening. I couldn't for the life of me think where I knew the name Amy from. Quick call to the hospital revealed that Amy was actually a fellow doctor. One day, one of my children left a book in Steve's car, and it was the perfect opportunity to go to the hospital to try and find it. So I headed to his department and I spoke to one of the nurses on the front desk. I made a joke about having work phones, and this nurse turned around and was like, "We don't have work phones. This hospital is way too cheap to give us work phones." And I was like, caught you out again. So with all of this information under my belt, I went to speak to a divorce lawyer. And the news that she gave me was horrible. We live in a no-fault state, which basically means that if we were to get divorced, it doesn't matter who did what, equal parts would get equal things. So Steve would get half of my money, even though I make more than him, and even though he was cheating on me. That's what I wanted to hear. So there was only one person I thought I could trust in this situation. He was a fellow teacher who works at my school called Dave. Dave had been married when he was 19, but he got the marriage annulled because his wife got herself pregnant by another person 6 months into the marriage. That is rough, Dave. So I told Dave what happened, and he said to me, if you don't like the hand you've been dealt, just change the deck. And that changed my life. The only loophole I could find so that I would not have to pay any child support or get a bad deal in a divorce is if I was to make less money than Steve and become the primary caregiver. So I checked, and an admin job had come up at my husband's hospital. It was less hours and less pay, and I became 100% caregiver. So once all this was underway, I spoke to a lawyer again. Basically told me that even though I was making less, I needed Steve to make a lot more. And something happened that played into my plan very, very well. Steve came home from work and he was in a foul mood. His supervisor had told him that he was going to need to get a higher education because in years to come he was going to struggle to hold his place. So he needed to go and get a master's in something else to do with medicine. Steve was very, very reluctant in the start. I was like, listen, I can take care of the kids more often, I can cut my hours down, and you can have every evening to study or go to class, knowing full well that he would not study nor go to class in the evenings. He'd be going to see Amy. We know you're game, Steve. So I knew for a fact that it was going to take about 2 or 3 years for this to happen, so I lay in wait because my plan was nearly done. So circling back to Dave, me and Dave became so close at this time. He was my best friend. Dave would come and help me with the children while Steve was out and about with Amy, studying. So Dave and I started our own affair. Years go by. Steve finishes his degree. I speak to the lawyers again and we are able to get a little agreement going. I decided to have the divorce papers served on his birth, just, to really sprinkle it in. When he was served, I told him that I knew all about Amy, had done for years. It actually worked out really well in the end. We got divorced, I got to keep the house, I got to keep all the stuff, and me and Dave are getting married next year. And Steve actually got fired because you're not supposed to have relationships within the same department. Sad and alone, Steve. Sad and alone. My ex ruined his life, and I'm buzzing about it. Story time. So I found out that my ex was having an affair. He told me that he'd found a woman at work and he'd fallen madly in love with her. From this, he told me that he no longer loved me anymore and he wanted to get a divorce. Bearing in mind, we have been together since we were 14 years old. We're married, obviously, and we have 3 children together. And he has known this woman for 3 months. So I desperately fought for our marriage, but he would just not stop seeing this woman. This one time he disappeared from Friday afternoon to Monday night. And that was the final straw for me. And at that point I was like, see ya, and I threw him out. I actually needed that. The day after this, he immediately moved in with that other girl. I literally begged this man to give me a reason. And he was just like, there's just something about this girl. And he kept saying over and over again, I deserve to be happy. That was it. Nothing else. That was the excuse for ending our marriage. The reason he was throwing our lives away was because there was something about this girl. So skipping forward, we ended up filing the divorce in early 2022. I faked my feelings enough to get a pretty favourable divorce settlement. He wasn't really intending on having a long divorce process and getting stuff out of it, because he just wanted to be with this other girl so much. It meant that I got to keep the house. However, I did have to give him quite a hefty payout. Throughout all of it, the children took it really hard. My son turned around to him and said, if you have a relationship with this other woman, I won't have anything to do with you. The daughter does have somewhat of a relationship with him. Every single time she speaks to him or she goes to see him, she comes back really upset. So 4 months after the divorce goes through, Steve contacts me. Apparently, he realised that he had made an absolutely horrible mistake. He was asking if he could come home. Interesting, that, isn't it? So it turns out that this dream girl was actually a really nasty piece of work. She was not a good woman at all. So I used this opportunity to tell him exactly what I thought of him as a person. Whilst I was going at him, I thought I might as well tell him what he was like as a father and as a partner. I said, babe, this is your life now. I said, you no longer have a home at this house. I told him he should never even try contacting me again. A few things have happened since all of this went down. First of all, I ended up meeting someone. Oh no, no. Just ignore that. My sister actually ended up introducing me to a guy that she works with. We get on so well and we've been seeing each other since last summer. I actually don't feel bad for Steve at all. He destroyed our whole family without so much of an afterthought. Well, do you know what? Too bad, hon. I'm sad for you. We recently told our daughter that he'd actually broken up with this dream girl. We found out that this girl actually nicked all of his money. By his money, I actually mean my money. Remember the money that I'd had to give him for the divorce settlement? Yeah. Oh, and she also wrote off his car when she was drunk driving. So that is great for her. And I'm trying to act like I feel sorry for him. Inside, I am delighted that this is the life he has made for himself. Call me evil. Call me whatever. He brought all of this on himself. And Steve, if you're watching this, enjoy your shite one-bed apartment and your broken down car, hon. And we'll think of you when we go on our next holiday. We're going to Hawaii, which I know is your dream location to travel. Maybe I'll send you a postcard. Alexa, play Calm as a Bitch by Jojo Siwa. My boyfriend has been calling me his ex's name for the past 4 years. Story time. So I met my boyfriend Steve in uni a few years ago. We literally instantly hit it off. We were on the same course and one day during lunchtime he came up to me to compliment me on my hair. So we became really, really good friends after this. And for about a year it was just friendship. After that, we eventually started dating and it was absolutely incredible. We had so much in common. So one of our favourite things to do was to watch films together. And my favourite film of all time is Romeo and Juliet. I know it's dumb and I know it's silly, but I love it. Don't judge me. Anyway, so like 6 months into dating, we're lying in bed after a night out. He's playing with my hair. And Steve turns to me and says, I love you so much, Juliet. And we'd watched Romeo and Juliet just the day before, so I thought it was like a cute little pet name that we were going to do. So at that point, thinking it was like a cute thing we were going to start doing, and I was like, I love you too, Romeo. And it picked up since then. Every day we would say, love you Romeo, love you Juliet. It became like a cute little nickname. Now, I probably should have known that something was up by the way he apologised immediately after he'd said it. For the next 4 years, every day, I would call him Romeo. So much so that my actual name fizzled out of use. He would just call me Juliet. So 2 days ago, me and my boyfriend went to his brother's wedding. It was a really nice chance to meet all his old school friends. And in this, I got to meet his ex-girlfriend. Steve had gone to split off to speak to the lads and I stayed with the girls. I obviously had no bad blood towards this girl. So I was like, hi, my name's Tatty, what's your name? Because this was the first time I'd ever heard of this girl or met her. She turns to me and says, hi, nice to meet you, I'm Juliet. Like, you're who, sorry? What? And obviously, I'm not going to cause a scene at a wedding. So I just kept it in, blew it off. But don't get me wrong, I was absolutely livid. And what made it even worse is that she was an absolutely stunning, so sweet girl. As soon as we got home, I confronted him on it and he immediately burst into tears. He would not stop apologising. Bearing in mind, we had done, you know, the things and he'd called me Juliet during that, called me Juliet in front of his family and friends, in front of my family, all to find out that it wasn't a cute nickname, it was actually his ex-girlfriend's name. Am I wrong for calling my friend fake after she had plastic surgery and filler? Story time. So me and my boyfriend Steve broke up around 5 months ago. We had been together for literally like 5-6 years. Steve was literally the love of my life. Steve is literally the most amazing guy ever and I just love this guy so much. And I've literally been having the worst time of my life since we broke up. Steve is very, very handsome and very successful. He's also rich, which is very relevant. Keep that in mind. So I'm sure you can imagine that Steve is not going to have any issues finding his next girlfriend. So when we broke up, I asked for a clean break. I wanted no contact. I just knew that this was the only way I was going to get over Steve. So obviously my friends know all about this and they know how much I still very much love him. However, one of my friends, who I'll call Amy, has recently been joking about how Steve is back up for grabs again and she is buzzing about this. This was literally like a month after we broke up. Read the room, Amy. I ignored her and I just took it as a bad joke, bad timing. Amy is literally a 10 out of 10. I'm talking supermodel vibes. She can basically get whatever she wants. And she always brags about how she has never been rejected by a man, ever. Must be nice. I know that Steve would never go for her. He was never really into like the filler, surgery thing. Amy has had surgery. She's had Botox, filler, like lip, cheek, nose, chin. She's had the girls done. And then she's recently just come back from Turkey and had a BBL. Last time I went out for dinner, she brought up the fact that she wanted to date Steve. But one of my friends shot that down immediately and was like, we don't do that to each other. Amy just laughed it off. But at this point, I was kind of done with all the insensitive jokes. So I was like, hon, you are more than welcome to try. He just would not go for you. And she had the audacity to turn around to me and be like, well, I can literally get whoever I want. What makes you think I can't? And at this point, I snapped, and this might be where I'm in the wrong. I turned around and was like, oh, Steve isn't into fake girls like you. He doesn't like girls that have pumped their face with filler and have silicone implants scattered throughout her body. And then, as if that wasn't enough, I then went on to say, and he also doesn't like girls that are just with him for his money. That was when she started crying. She stormed out of the restaurant and was like, well, now I won't feel sorry for taking him. And of course, my friends have all sided with her. I waited until I got in my car to start crying. She literally was winding me up about this for months. So what do you think? Am I wrong here?